I'm Jack from Jack Bell's Photography, and today I'll be talking about composition. Included will be basic composition, including portraits and landscapes, black backgrounds, how to improve your photography with storytelling, and key tips. What's your approach to underwater photography? Are you a snapper? And we've seen quite a few of these. Do you take the encyclopedia approach? You take a front on and side on view all the time of absolutely everything you see underwater. Some people are a mixture of both, so they take as many photos as possible, front on, side on, front on, side on. Maybe hundreds of photos of the same critter because they need to take photos. Unfortunately, many of these photos won't be interesting, so let's see how composition can help you. Composition. Let's start with the rule of thirds. The yellow lines are drawn in at a third along the horizontal and the vertical part of the photo. So these are the places where you want to put the most interesting objects. So the lighthouse is on the line of thirds. The foreground interest here is below the bottom line of thirds, and then you've got the intersecting point at the bottom left third is just above the small pool, the small jacuzzi. In the more general form, the black line gives you the golden rule, and where the golden rule ends, that's considered the particularly attractive part. You can see the thin black lines where the rule of thirds goes, and then the reciprocating line from a diagonal across the photo. Here you can see the reciprocating line. This is the reciprocating point, and that's also a point of interest. So you can actually take your choice. There's no absolute rule. You can choose whether to put your subject at any one of these points to maximize the interest of your composition. Here you can see the reciprocating point. There are actually 4 of them in each photo. Let's look to apply this to this particular photo. This is a landscape photo, so you can see the foreground subjects are below the line of third at the bottom. You can see the intersecting point of the reciprocating point, and the line of thirds is just at the base of the bridge, and that reflects underneath to give a certain amount of symmetry. And you can also see a nice curved line at the bottom to provide more interest. The mid-ground subjects are the palm trees, the green palm trees, and then the background is provided by the blue sky. Applied to a portrait, you can see the reciprocating point is almost at the eye on the left. The eye on the right is on the center line. And this is something that's typically done by a lot of classical artists, painters. This one's by Raphael. He has a tendency to put the dominant eye, the one on the right in this case, somewhere on the center line. You can also see that the shoulders are aligned directly to the viewer. So applied to this particular portrait photo, you can see the dominant eye, which is the one on the left in this case, is almost on the center line. A lot of photos have mainly horizontal and vertical features. Diagonal ones add dynamism to the photo, and here you can see 4 actually formed by the apparatus and the legs. So these add a certain amount of dynamism and interest to this photo. The portrait of this lionfish follows almost exactly on from Raphael, and you can see the dominant eye, the only one you can see here, is right on the center line. Also, this diagonal line follows the line of the body of the fish as well. So that adds dynamism to this particular photo, because the fish appears to be pointing down and looking at the bottom right hand corner. Here's another portrait. So the eye in this case is at the reciprocal point, the left-hand eye. There's also a lot of negative space in the right-hand side of this picture. So that's blurred out background, and that provides interest. In fact, that takes the viewer back to the main subject. Applied to this photo, you can see juvenile sweet lips and its eye, its main eye, the only one you can really see, the other one's hard to see, and that's almost around on the line of thirds. And then the fish is nicely curved to provide a little bit more interest, and then you can see some of the surrounding foliage, a sponge, and they're very colourful, so they contrast with the juvenile sweet lips itself. Applied to another type of critter, a nudibranch, so instead of focusing on the eye, we use the rhinopore, and you can see the right-sided rhinopore is right at the reciprocating point. The middle of the head is almost on the middle line, and then the body of the nudibranch runs on a diagonal, which almost points down to the bottom right-hand corner. You can see the back of the nudibranch is blurred out, but this adds interest to this particular photo as it adds depth. Here, this fish, this is hiding behind a bit of sponge, and you can see the eye is very pretty and is on the lower reciprocating point. Just showing the fish hiding adds a little bit of interest to this photo, and it almost appears to be smiling. Here's another nudibranch. So the center of the mouth is at the reciprocating point, and then the blurred out body runs on the diagonal line, and that adds depth to this photo. This one's a lot simpler, a lot more black, and all the surrounding items are very blurred out and brown. So the main focus really here is on the subject. This mantis shrimp, you can see that the right-sided eye is on the reciprocating point, and the dynamism to this photo is added by the antenna and the legs, which form diagonal lines heading towards the bottom right-hand corner. And you can see a certain amount of negative space on the top right-hand side, which takes the viewer back to the eyes, which are very pretty, and this part of the head here of the mantis shrimp. In a traditional landscape photo, we use rule of thirds as well. So here you've got some foreground items in the bottom right-hand corner. The sign and the roof are at the points of a third. The top of the lake is almost at the top line of third, and then you've got the sky as a background. So you've got foreground, midground, and background. In this another example, you've got the main point of interest, which is a lighthouse, which is on the left-hand line of thirds. Also, that runs through the middle of the jacuzzi, and you've got the background, which is the beautiful sunset on this particular night. So applied to an underwater photo, this is a wide-angle photo, and this was taken at a pier. So everything's turned round to the side, and the foreground interest here is on the right-hand side. That's the growth on the pier legs. The midground interest is provided by the diver with the light, which is shining directly at the camera, so that attracts the attention of the viewer. And then you've got another point of interest, which is in the background, and that's a sunburst. This one's a bit more interesting. Why? Because this is a lot of growth. Another wide-angle shot, but this time you've got a diagonal line. The diver and the light is almost on the center point of this photo. The background, you can just about see the sun in the top, but you've got a few diagonal lines and curved lines provided by the rope and the silhouette of the diver, and the rope and the growth lead you down to another point of interest, which is a yawning frogfish at the bottom of the rope. Here putting in some of the background and not just focusing tightly on the nudibranch helps to make this photo much more dynamic, because you can see the nudibranch itself is on the reciprocating point, and then the body lies on the diagonal going to the top right hand corner. You've got several other diagonals which are provided by the thing that it's sitting on, with some red to provide you some color interest. That provides a framing for the nudibranch, and then you've got a lot of negative space provided by the blackness of the background. Here again, a slightly more dynamism, because you've got a diagonal line, so the whip coral forms a diagonal line and then curves, and then the whip coral shrimp is also diagonal, and the eye, its dominant eye, is appearing at the reciprocating point. So much more dynamic than a horizontal view of the same shrimp. This one shows you the framing and black background. So the black background is used to make the colours more interesting, both of the surroundings and the main subject. The main subject is a very attractive seahorse, and its eye is at the reciprocating point at the top left hand side. The subject is actually very interesting because it forms a natural curve, and then there are a couple of diagonals going down towards the bottom right hand corner, formed by both the seahorse and its tail, which is attached to the sponge. Another example of a black background. This really makes the subject pop. You can see an interesting part of the subject just behind the eye is on the rule of the thirds. What would make this more dynamic, though, is if this ornate ghost pipefish was at an angle and pointing to the bottom right hand corner. Here you've got some interest which is generated. You've got the dorrid eggs which are swirling around the center point, and there you've got a nudibranch which is inside eating. Now you can take your pick. Here maybe a little bit more interesting because you can see the nudibranch more clearly. It's on this reciprocating point right in the middle of the nudibranch. The nudibranch is orange, so it stands out, and the body forms a diagonal going to the bottom right hand corner. So you can see which one you like best. Here the nudibranch isn't so visible, so I think this one's actually more dynamic and more interesting. Behaviour adds a lot of interest. So if the subject is doing something interesting, but you can't really see it eating this leaf, the nudibranch, oh, it's not nudibranch, it's a slug. The eye is almost in the center. You can see the eye just about. It's almost in the center of the photo, like classic Raphael. But if you wait for it to eat a different type of leaf with a stem that's more easily visible, I think this adds a lot more interest and a lot more dynamism to the photo. And in the last one, here we see a few items of composition all put together. Here you've got a really long nudibranch, and this one is normally really difficult to photo and make it interesting. Well, here its behavior has actually done something interesting, because it was walking along this leaf and decided to double back on itself. So that makes for a really nice photo. You've got a black background to make the greens of the foliage stand out. You've got the texture of the nudibranch itself. The leaf on which it's walking forms a diagonal to the bottom left hand corner. The intersecting point is on the leaf halfway between the two parts of the nudibranch, and the head of the nudibranch is just about on the central line, at least its rhinopores are as well. So hopefully you found this piece on composition interesting, and remember that photography is not a spectator sport, and see you next time.